it's working.
Right on.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We are live.
All right, everyone. Thank you for being a part of our Life Church gathering of pastors. I'm actually not seeing anything, so I'm going. There you go.
It's up.
All righty.
You're there.
Everyone see it? That's
Look at
right.
that. Looking
All
good.
Right. Welcome to Lunchbreak with Alan Tumpkin. I am so glad that you are checking us out on your phones, on your laptops, or wherever you are. And I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. We sure did, and did a lot of walking. I think I had a cauliflower pizza. I mean, hey, whatever. It worked. Anyway, no, that's not what I had. But again, welcome to Lunch Break. We have a real special show today with special people. We're joined by the pastors of our Life Church network, and that would be Life Church Canton, the pastors Nathan McWhorter. When I call your name, just wave, yeah, and Life Church Livonia, Brian Nanninga, and he's drinking and eating a sandwich while we're on the show because it's called Lunch Break. I got that. We have Daniel Fagboy, who is that pronounced it perfect?
It's close enough, brother. I won't hold you.
You say it.
It's for boy.
Hey, man, I'm just not good at stuff.
Listen, it's close. I've heard worse.
All right. Well, it's good to see you, Daniel, who is a pastor. Now, give your title, because I know that you do diversity there, but you have a title that's broader than that. So what's your title there at Life Church Canton?
Yeah, I think the official title is Pastor of Handsomeness.
That's what I have, actually.
Humbly so. Teaching pastor of adult ministries.
Okay, real good. All right, we also have Don Earl Johnson, the handsome Navy, is it, or Marine? Navy. I'm sorry, who has the psychedelic background back there. It's really cool. It makes me remember coffee and Foxy Brown and all that kind of stuff. But it looks very good.
I love you, Alan.
I know you do.
I'm gonna overcome evil with good.
That's right. That's a good thing. We have finally, but not should be number one, is Georgia Hill, Dr. Georgia Hill, who is the pastor of Life Church Riverside. And it's good to see you. You did a wonderful job with our Mother's Day service, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for asking me. That was exciting. My first time preaching on Mother's Day. Yay!
That's awesome. 19 years, 20 years of ministry. This is your first time. Well, you did.
I started when I was 5.
Wow.
That's great.
So 20 years of ministry. That's fantastic.
That's right. So again, thank you. What we're going to be talking today, and first of all, you see that there's camaraderie with us, and I'm so glad that we're together. We don't get together enough, and it took the pandemic to drive us together, which is really great, and we're going to do even more in the future. But we're here today. We're on to talk about really responding to injustice, because as a church, what are we doing as a network to respond to the injustice in our world? We're going to look specifically and talk about the Ahmaud Arbery case and his death, his murder. And we're just going to not rehash all the details, but talk about how we can make sure that the Church of Jesus Christ, or Life Church, as well as the Church Universal, how we can encourage one another to respond properly to injustice. A couple questions I want to ask, and you can jump in, but I would invite all of you, because since we represent the Life Church Network, it's important for us for me to hear, and for our people to hear our thoughts on what happened on February 23rd. That is the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Nathan, what were your visceral thoughts? What did you feel? What did you thinking when you saw the video and when you started seeing the unfolding of the case? Nathan McWhorter from Life Church Canton.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I just immediately was just the visual of watching it happen kind of shook me to the core a little bit. And just the middle of the street, the middle of the day. I think my dread is the word. Even though I knew what was going to happen, it's almost like I was hoping something different would happen, even though I knew he was already passed. And then what followed the next couple of days, because I didn't find out about it until the evening, and I just spent some time praying and realizing we got to talk about this the very next day. And once that decision was made, I didn't sleep well the whole night, my mind. And I think even now talking about it, the emotions that are rising up in me, it's different when you're outside and shelter in place and you're watching people jog by. And I had a moment where I was jogging up to Ford Road off of Cherry Hill, and I was doing a stupid workout where I'm running, stopping, doing push-ups, running, stopping, doing push-ups and squats. And I'm on my face doing push-ups, and I hear someone yell at me. And I look over, and there's a cop car in the middle of the street, and he's just yelling at me. And I just I got up, and I kind of was annoyed with him and rude to him. And then he left, and we'd laughed afterwards and left. And then I was running, and I was reminded of that, and just how my experience is so significantly different. And I remember just feeling just this deeper pain about it, and how I don't even understand. Yeah. And I think that's, as I was watching people jog the last couple of days, I don't understand. Yeah. And I'm overwhelmed by that. I'm overwhelmed by what it would be like to be a man of color. Yeah. I can't fathom it. And so I'm deeply disturbed, and I'm deeply hurt, and I am feeling for my community, and I'm looking for how we can continue to move forward in the midst of this while lamenting the loss of a life.
Thank you, Nathan. Don Earl, what were your feelings, thoughts?
Yeah, as I shared on last Thursday, initially it was pain, it was anger, it was a sense of being numb because this is recurring. And so there was a mixture of feelings all at the same time. And wonder as well that how could someone devalue life? I mean, and as I shared again on Thursday, to see that video and see how the guy literally walked away as if job well done, as Ahmaud fell to the ground and died. Yeah, it was hard, but again, it was numbing at the same time, because this is not the first, and unfortunately may not be the last.
Brian, jump on in. Brian Annigan from Life Church Livonia.
Yeah, I think I had quite a few emotions. First was anger, and what in the world, not again. The next was fear, I think. As a lot of you know, my youngest child is Black, and we let him run around our neighborhood all the time and ride his bike. And I couldn't stop picturing his face. Yeah. And he's 9.
Yeah.
He's only 9, and yet some people have already seen him as a threat at times.
Yeah.
And so I vacillated back and forth between anger and fear. And but then I think resolve would be kind of my next feeling. Resolve to a friend of mine shared on his Facebook page the other day that all these people, they're putting Run with Maude on their Facebook page, and he said, if you're going to run with Maude, I would suggest you stretch first, because this is not going to be a short run. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a really long day after day, week after week, month after month run, and you better stretch first because you're you need to be in it for the long haul. And so I think resolve for me to say, this is not something that we just need to, come around for a week or 2 weeks until the press dies. But I was like, no, dang it. We're going to talk about this and keep talking about it and keep doing something about it until I don't have to be afraid for my son anymore.
Brian, it's funny that you brought that up because I saw a picture of your family on Facebook yesterday. Yeah. And I just stopped and I looked at this beautiful picture of your family, and I stopped and looked at your son, who I've seen and witnessed him grow. And I saw that his face is filling out, his neck, he's becoming a big boy. And I feared. Yeah. I actually felt it. I said, wow. And like you said, when you witness the video, you can see your son's face.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow.
Absolutely.
Georgia Hill, Life Church, Riverside. What were your feelings?
Definitely anger was the first thing I felt. Anger. And then, I'm an attorney. And so I think anger was definitely the feeling I felt, because I was really angered that this had happened so long ago and nothing had happened. Yeah. And as I began to read in the newspaper articles and online about the history of this situation, I got even more angry because there was a complete failure of the system to enforce. Not only that, but there was a system of laws in place that basically made it possible for this to happen. This sort of toxic mix of stand your ground and citizens arrest, coming together in a way which makes it possible for people to feel like they're justified in doing what they're doing. Yeah. And I tell you, there's a lot of details in this scenario that have yet to come out. And I think as those details come out, just as I was reading even this morning, I learned more information about what had happened. I think that we're going to find that the justice system down there, that particular city, Brunswick, is very, very rife with improprieties in their police department. And they've had a number of lawsuits against the police department over the past several years. And so I think I felt anger. I felt somewhat kind of an indignation and really a disappointment with the law enforcement system. And then I think several other pastors have mentioned it as well, that this is definitely a long-term course. This is a long journey. Yeah. But I definitely feel that we have to really hold our public officials accountable, and we have to keep watch over what people are doing. We cannot fall asleep and think that everything's okay.
Yeah. Good stuff. If you're just tuning in, you're looking at Lunchbreak with Alan Tumpkin. We're talking with the pastors of the Life Church Network, Earl Johnson, the pastor of Life Church Auburn Hills, Nathan McWhorter, the lead pastor of Life Church Canton, Brian Naniga, the lead pastor of Life Church Livonia, Georgia Hill, lead pastor of Life Church Riverside, and Daniel Figbury. I hope I got it better.
It got worse.
One of the teaching pastors at Life Church Canton. And we're really talking about responding to injustice. I'm sure that a lot of you are wanting to chime in and talk, and I say go on and talk. This is something that we'll be talking for a long time. And as we get into some strategies, I would love for our viewers to just in the comments, just write down things that they think that we as the church could do. And we can, look at those things and ponder and brainstorm and chew on. So again, in the comments, just write down some things you think that we as the church can do in order to respond properly to injustice. We want to go to Daniel and find out what you felt. What were your visceral feelings when you saw the video and heard more about it? Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I think in my first reaction before seeing the video was numbness. We've been here before. And so I kind of was tuning myself out because in my role here at Life Church, I'm sort of the resident African-American in a sense, right? who gets to talk about these things a lot, and sometimes to the detriment of my own emotional health. And so I was numbing myself to it. Then I saw the video, and my wife walked in with me murmuring, "Why us? Why us? Why us?" And just watching him fall lifeless, and the resolute swagger of the gentleman who shot him, and I'm using gentleman very kindly, and then the other gentleman come in with a .357 revolver in his hand as if to pump more bullets into him, shocked me. I think I went through the stages of grief in like 1 minute. I started off denying it, like this isn't real. I'm like you, Nathan. I was like, yeah, it's like, the end of this movie, but you're like, nah, I'm hoping something, maybe there's, what is it in cartoon world, we talk about alternate time warps or whatever. Like, okay, let something else happen. Then I started to bargain in my head of, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? Then I started to prepare myself for whenever this conversation happens in any context of having to explain to people who are different from me why this is not an isolated incident and why this is a systematic issue. So I started to sort of go into that mindset. Then I started to feel true anger. And anger at the fact that I have to convince people that this is real. And that, maybe in the 1800s, maybe in the early 1900s, it was hard to research these things because, much of history has been whitewashed. But you're like a Google away from seeing the reality of this. And so the anger was like, no, you don't want to see this. And then I just, again, kept on saying, why us? And as you mentioned in how you butcher my last name, I'm African. And my parents are Nigerian. And so I have an interesting background in the sense that I identify as an African-American, but I also identified as an African man. And so for me, the systematic prejudice and discrimination of Black people and murder of Black people doesn't just stop in America for me. I look at Africa as a whole and say to myself, every ailment that's currently happening in Africa, every problem in Africa is because of the introduction of European powers, if you sort of look at it. And so now I'm thinking in my head, why us? Why every country? Why every continent? Why every era of life are we the guinea pig? Are we the disposable entity? And so this to me is at the very core of one's identity. And so I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm depressed. I'm thinking this is an alternate reality. I'm asking myself, what does this look like for people to actually enter into this? So it's a mixture of things, man. And I think in the last few days of even hearing a few comments of people saying that this is anti-white, to have a discussion about this is anti-white, to have a discussion about this is not gospel. And so I'm hearing all those things from so-called Christians. And my wife and I actually had a unique conversation. I shared this with Nathan already. We had a unique conversation that we've never had before of, if you keep speaking about this, you could get shot. And I don't know if that's a reality that is helpful for me to live in. But those of us who are pigmented walk a line of brothers and sisters who have sacrificed themselves. And if there's anything that this era has shown me in the last few years, is that we're not that far removed for someone standing up and shooting me or you while we're preaching. We're not that far removed. And so this sits differently for me. That if we continue to talk about this, we have a long tradition of black men and Black women being killed, either your identity being assassinated or you physically being assassinated. And so this is not a theory. It's not a philosophy. It's not a treatise. It's not some statement. It is real life for real people. And so for me, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, but I think beyond that, I'm dismayed of how people who specifically speak into Christianity, how people who are Christians can look at this and not see this as a gospel issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, this is stuff. It's interesting because yesterday Marcia and I, my wife and I, every single evening we take a walk, and we'll walk or jog 2-3 miles every single evening. And it was raining yesterday, and she says, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, well, it's not raining now. So it was kind of sprinkling. So I kind of bundled up and I started walking, and she kept trying to say, don't, I want you to stay. I want you to stay. And my stubborn self, I said, no, I got to get my walk in and get my work. And so I just pushed through it. And let me tell you, this is the very first time that when I started walking with baseball cap and hoodie in my neighborhood, that I started wondering. I started looking around. I started feeling some fear. Now that doesn't make me feel good. So we as pastors, we're talking about how we're feeling. So if we're feeling a certain way right now as pastors, how do we communicate to our family, to our congregation? How will we comfort them? Because, we're needing comfort right now, just thinking about, but yet, if we're feeling like this now, then, there may be a mist here in the pulpit, but there's a big old fog in the congregation. So what do we say? I'd love for you to jump in. How do you communicate? Now, Nathan said that at the beginning. He said, Nathan, you said when you saw this, when you heard this, when you read this, you said, I know I got to talk about it.
Yeah.
So what do you say to your congregation, Nathan?
Yeah. I think we luckily had a platform the very next day to speak about it. And so I knew immediately if Pastor Daniel was willing that we would spend a significant amount of time talking about it. And people can go back and check that out on the podcast, but I encourage you to watch it live because you get to see the openness and that. I think where our congregation is right now, we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, Be the Bridge, and some of the other things. There's some people who have been working hard on this for months and years. But for those who aren't, who've heard about it but haven't dived in, I think Daniel said it best, but my heart as well is it's a plea. Please see this as life. Please see the loss of life. Please allow this to move you. Please allow this to dig beneath all of the justifications or all of the character questions that you have before you allow yourself to see it, feel it, dwell there. And allow that godly sorrow to drive you to seek questions and answers. Because what we're really dealing with, not for everybody, but for a lot of people in my congregation and the people that we're loving in our direct are dealing with a little bit of fragility. And things like this are opportunities in community to see people and see the loss of life and let that begin a journey. I do feel we've done a lot of work. We have a lot of work left to do, but there's many who are still not on the journey, on that difficult run, right? That run that we need to stretch for. Some of them don't even know they need to. And that's our privilege to not have to care. But it's also our responsibility and our privilege as Christian men and women to walk with our brothers and sisters, to enter in when we don't have to, but Christ says we have to. Christ says we have to walk and bear each other's burdens, and we have to fight for justice. So for me, I would say there are many, and even if you're watching right now because you're stirred up in your spirit, it's time to begin the journey towards understanding the brokenness and the systematic racism even within the church. It's time to walk.
Good. Don Earl.
I want to speak to the leaders first and then to congregation. One, I would say to use your voice for the leaders, not just our pastors here, because some leaders elect not to say anything. And I think it's very unfortunate because people in your congregation is being informed. They're being informed by someone. They're being informed by whatever favorite news, whatever politician, they're being informed. And then they're sitting in our congregation, and we have a responsibility to speak not what Fox or CNN or whatever your favorite show host is or news circuit, but we have a responsibility to speak what God is saying. And I think I've been places where I've seen that voice not used in leadership. And so I want to make sure that if there's some leaders, some pastors, speak, use, because again, if you go silent, they're going to be informed by someone. In this hour, we need to make sure they're hearing from God. And so I wanted to say that to the leaders. For congregation, I think at the same time, what we say before events like this matters more than what we're saying right now. I think a problem with us is that we are reactive instead of proactive. And which again, I'm speaking back to the leaders. So I don't know why I'm speaking to the leaders, but yeah, we're reactive. When stuff happens, we're like, oh yeah, let's do it. We have to make it a priority. And as Daniel mentioned, this is not a part, as long as we look at this as an addendum to the gospel, then we're not going to make it a priority. So again, congregation wise, I encourage you to live into this moment, to value life. I can echo really what Nathan was saying, to value life. We have a community, a multicultural community, where we talk about grace and space. We have to be able to journey together in there in the context of hopefully friends. We have a strategy, if you will, or actually more of a mission. I don't want to sound strategy, of 3C friendships, of being committed. The first C is committed. The second C is being cross-cultural. And the third C is being Christ-centered. And so within that framework, we have critical conversations, hard conversations, and to the point where we're on a journey together. You have to have space and grace where people can ask questions and not be labeled. People, they may not understand from your perspective. And so you need space to have these conversations. So when people are asking questions, when you can either label them, oh, he's a racist because he said that, or you can enter dialogue. You can hear it, because we all have various contexts. And I don't want to get too involved, but there is something called transformative learning in andragogy, which is the study of adult learning. And Jack Mesereau, you can research it. But there's a transformative learning. There's a phrase of disorienting dilemmas, and all of us have our own context, and our context is real to us. And so what happens is we view the world, we view each other, we view and ourselves through that context. And until we encounter other people, then we have those disorienting dilemmas where the information that we have in our head is now confronted with new information. And in order for us to be transformed, we have to have this critical reflection in order for us to live into a new context that I believe that God is calling us into. And so that's what we try to share and try to live into, to walk patiently, to forbear one another, to live in that context, again, that multicultural context of learning, and create space and grace where we can have those conversations and not be labeled and processed. So
yeah, good stuff. Brian, what are you saying to your congregation?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is to realize that in Livonia is, up until the 2010 census, was the whitest city in America, over 100,000. Livonia is the place where it didn't really, no one knew where Livonia was until the 60s, when all of the white people fled Detroit, and this is where they moved. And not proud of that. But what it means for me is that there's a lot of work to be done here. And I think for me, it's helping my congregation hear the full story. Because for generations, they've been hearing one story and believing one thing. And I'm not just talking, years, I'm talking generations.
Yeah.
They've been hearing the same story. And they've come to a place where they've believed that story. It's become enmeshed in the very center of who they are and what they believe about life, and what they believe about human dignity and value and worth, and what they believe about, they believe that their life is worth more, and that they're smarter and more successful and more well-behaved and have a deeper sense of morality. And there's a sickness and a sin there that comes with the belief in that story that I think part of my job is to help them to see that there's a completely, first of all, that the narrative they've been living around is based on a lie. And second of all, to begin to expose them to that narrative. So we do that, and we've done that regularly from the pulpit. I do it. I'm not the kind of person that engages in public all-out battles on social media, mostly because I haven't seen that that's been helpful. But I am a person that has gone to battle privately. And when I say battle, I mean, that sounds really, I don't know if that sounds very Christian, but it is battle. And I think God calls us to go to battle on behalf of the people that need us to stand beside them. And so privately, I've been going to battle for the last 10 years, even before I came here. And countless conversations with individuals. And so for a season, I was hiding friends on Facebook. Honestly, I was pausing their posts. I've gone back and unhid all those people. The ones that say things that make my blood boil, the ones that post lies, the ones that masquerade their beliefs as Christian when they're really sinful and from the devil. And engaging that whenever I can privately. And so, because I've seen more fruit from that. So yeah, we've been a part of some of the stuff with Be the Bridge that Nathan, mentioned earlier. Our people have been a part of that. And we've done our very best to make sure that our congregation isn't reflective of our community in terms of its demographic. That Livonia might be 97% white, but our congregation definitely is not. And so that's been really intentional.
What's powerful with what you're saying, see, you're saying something a little different. So you're saying, I talk to my people, and I'm not just encouraging them to be friends or to get to know people. I'm talking to my people and telling them to rid your white supremacy. He said, before you can be my friend, I better know that you're dealing with that, because I can't interact with you if you don't understand the white structures of this country. Yeah. So this is very powerful, because you gave this history of Livonia, which you're right. Georgia and I, from the Detroit area, we knew not to drive into Livonia.
Yeah. Right.
It is what it is.
But none of the people that live in Livonia every time I've told my white Livonia friends that my black friends call Livonia sundown city because you shouldn't drive through Livonia after sundown, none of them have ever even heard that term before.
I know.
And then I begin to tell them stories of my friends who are black who've gotten pulled over for no reason in Livonia just for driving. And I think part of my job is to bring that narrative to light and to challenge those things. And Alan, you're right. I have lost friends over this. But I'm okay with that.
But you've spared your son's life.
I hope.
Yeah, I hope. But again, again, you're challenging the sin, the deep, heinous sin and seduction that white America has believed that they are, you listed it, that they're smarter, that they're more moral, that they are right. I grew up thinking, right, white is right, black get back. I'm hearing this, but you are challenging it because you're talking about a city that the characteristic of it, or the what it's like, is racist. So I appreciate all of the things you said, but you dug into some stuff that I'm feeling. That as a pastor of a church that's predominantly Black, our family of believers at that church, we won't trust you unless you're dealing with your racism. And I know that you are having those discussions. That's why I'm so happy what Nathan is doing with the bridge. So again, we're looking at what you're doing and we're saying, I can tell that they're actually doing something about it. And so, wow. That's good stuff. We're going to wrap up in a little bit, but I want to, again, we still have new people coming on, and you're looking at Lunchbreak with Alan Tumpkin, and I am talking with the pastors of the Life Church Network, and that's Nathan McCorder, lead pastor of Life Church Canton, Don Earl Johnson, lead pastor of Life Church Auburn Hills, and Daniel, and he is from Nigeria. He is a diversity pastor.
Say his last name.
His last name.
Way to pivot right there, brother. Way to pivot. I like it.
Daniel Faboy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
you put a glottal stop right on that G.
All right.
You got to give it a little space right there.
And Brian Manninger, the pastor of Life Church Livonia, and Georgia Hill, the pastor of Life Church Riverside. So you've kind of talked about, I want to go to real quickly. I want to ask a question to you, Georgia, and then, well, let me do this. I want to go back to what we were talking about. Go to Daniel, because Daniel, you are working with diversity there at Canton. It's not as formal, but this is what you do. What are you saying to your small groups, to the congregants that are under your care?
So I'm leading a small group of people. One of the things that we've tried to figure out is what's the next step after Be the Bridge. Be the Bridge is helpful. I think it's a good entree, but it doesn't go deep enough. And so I've had to sort of look at the next steps. And what we've been doing is I'm taking a small group through Color of Compromise. And so what I did was create my own questions. Well done, sir.
I'm here to support you, Daniel.
Let me just have a real moment for a second. That's truer than you think. Because in 17 years of Life Church Canton, this is the first time that we've had this conversation. And I don't think this conversation gets had without you being passionate about it. So your white privilege
without Nathan being passionate about it.
So whether you joke, but I feel that support more than ever. And so thank you.
Good.
Amen.
But so Color of Compromise. So I had to create my own discussion questions. And we're digging in and we are seeing this history of the white church and what it's done. And then we're seeing how that's still happening now. And so that's a really good read, and that's helping inform conversations. But in addition to that, I'm also wanting to, so David Swanson is, I forget his title, but he's a Caucasian pastor, and he speaks deeply about these racial issues.
He's one of our pastors in the Covenant in Chicago.
He is actually, yes. And it's something that I've always felt and initially actually tried to do when I first got here was to create a space. He says, white pastors, you need to create a space where Black folks can have real talk within themselves and not need to be there to supervise. Which, if you know the history of the white church, that's always been there. Let's supervise the Negroes as they talk, as they communicate, as they have conversations. So we'll keep that there. And so I've tried to create a space now recently through GroupMe where African Americans can feel the comfort to say exactly how they feel without worrying about being an angry Black man or angry Black woman or playing into that stereotype. But I also have created, as much as I can, a space where sincere Caucasians can ask sincere questions. And I'm putting much emphasis on sincere. They can have sincere conversations, not conversations like, hey, what's with this race thing? Not conversations about, oh man, it looks like life is getting better for African Americans. Not those superficial conversations. So my encouragement is to dig in and press in. And I had an interesting conversation with Garth, and I won't get into the details about it, but I love that brother. And he
Garth McGrath, who's the superintendent of the Great Lakes Conference. Gotcha.
Super real with me about just how he was feeling, and to the point of tears.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I said to him is, I'm not going to tell you to stop crying. Feel that. I think as African Americans, sometimes we feel the need to hurry up and go comfort our white brothers and sisters when they're mourning and when they're lamenting. No, I would like for you to sit in that. And so my sort of encouragement to my Caucasian brothers and sisters when they come up with that is sit in that, feel that, appreciate that. Let's have conversations, but sit in that. And so I think, but I think ultimately, so just to capture it all, is I'm pointing folks back to the gospel, that this is a real primary, this is the imago Dei, this is the image of God issue. This is a second commandment, do you love your neighbor issue. This is not some tertiary issue or some issue. And again, Nathan, we talked about this on Table Talk. This notion that we can't talk about race and politics in the church, where we get that, where they do that at? How is that acceptable? If there's anybody that should be talking about race and politics, it's the church, because your race has political implications. Right. It has policy implications. It has implications on life on people. And so I think being able to wade in that with people has been super helpful and let people sit and lament and feel the pain of it. But I think more than anything else is to create a space where African Americans can have a straight conversation and then articulate our language so that we can be able to express ourselves. Sure, we can express our frustrations, we can express our anger, but in a way that our brothers and sisters don't hear the anger and not the point. And I think that's helpful, and that's helpful to help people put language to those things. But yeah, that's the big thing, is to help people put language to what they're experiencing. And say, yeah, that's real. That you should feel that. That's perfect. Yeah.
I love that, Daniel. Can I say something about that real quick? Mm-hmm. Specifically to my white brothers and sisters out there. Some of you are waking up right now for the first time. And I want to encourage you not to immediately run to the only person of color you know and expect them to answer all your questions. My brothers and sisters have been dealing with this their entire life. And Daniel mentioned earlier how the emotional toll it takes. It's painful. So what I would say to my white brothers and sisters who are starting to wake up and starting to wonder, I would say, do your homework first. Do the hard work first. There are countless resources out there. We mentioned Be the Bridge numerous times. If you join the Be the Bridge Facebook group, they won't allow you to post or speak there for the first, I think, 3 months of your time there, because they want you to be a learner first. There's an entire course of material there that you can go through to begin to see the real history of America and the true reality of racism around us. Do that work first, because I think when we immediately jump to trying to have our friends of color answer all of our questions, we actually dehumanize them again. And that's not fair. And so I hope that's helpful to someone out there.
That's very helpful. We lost Nathan. I hope he comes back.
Alan, can I say something?
He's going to go do his research.
Oh, he's doing his homework.
He's doing his homework. Go ahead.
I just want to throw something out there. We're constantly addressing this as a topic, as opposed to the context of relationship. And I think there's a disservice when you do that, because we have more stake in the information again instead of each other. And so the beauty of being together and addressing this as friends, you really get to live it out. You see it from a different perspective in the context of relationship.
Yeah.
People are trying.
So that's what I was about to get to. So I have a question. Okay. So but I will say though,
I just didn't want to lose that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's our last question. You won't have friends if you don't deal with the issues. And so that's why I appreciate what Brian was saying, what Daniel was saying. I cannot be your friend, and you guys know me. I'm not going to be your friend if I don't think that you're serious about racial righteousness. I'm talking about friends. See, I think friendship is serious to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I agree with you, and we're going to get to that because now we are talking strategy, like how to build those friendships and how to maintain them. So yeah, I want to talk about that really quickly. So I'm glad you brought that up. I want to ask Georgia Hill a quick question. She is our resident attorney, and we need to talk really quickly about citizens arrest laws. Because we know about citizens arrest laws, and there are a couple of things. They can supposedly do that if a felony is committed. They can also do it if the felony is not committed. It's weird. It's kind of strange. And police officer can ask a person for assistance, and then that person can, jump in, or he is a merchant or security officer. But what do you think? And I'm sure you've thought through this. What do you think about citizens arrests and how that could is exasperating the issue of justice?
So the history of citizens arrest is that it comes about historically out of England in a specific context where you have large tracts of land where there are no arresting officials. Because there's no arresting officials, if there's a crime being committed, then the citizenry is empowered to stop and arrest. In the United States, this thing takes the form of vigilantism in communities that are racially charged. Today, when there are lots of police in many communities, and unfortunately, I have to say that the McMichael father and son team had acute awareness of presence of law enforcement because the elder was a previous police officer and also had been an investigator for the prosecutor's office. So they know where the police are. So this is not a situation where a citizen's arrest was necessary. You have to be normally you have to be someone who has seen the commission of a crime. And there's no justification for use of force. And so in most cases in the United States, you don't really need a citizen's arrest. Now, you might be able to find the person, find their home address, get their name, number, things like that, and provide that to the authorities, which is what should have happened in this case. But it turns out that the elder McMichael knew. See, this is the thing. He actually knew Ahmaud Arbery.
Oh.
So, right. So this is what I want to say. And I want to say thank you to Brian, because here's what needs to happen. People need to get the facts. People need to get the facts. What you need to do, everybody, you need to get the facts. You need to get the facts of today, what's going on, and you need to get the facts of history. Because if you get the facts of today and the facts of history, you will discover what's really going on. Mm-hmm. As long as people are able to reside in this Alice in Wonderland world that bases its news on outlets that are just giving you one slant, we're always going to be in this situation. But if you will just find out what's going on, then you really can't turn a blind eye. Right. And so I like to think of the truth as the Holy Spirit. Amen. I think that's who the truth is. But sometimes you need to get some facts, you need to get some factual information. So in my opinion, in this situation, a citizen's arrest was not necessary. It turns out that Ahmaud Arbery did have contact with the criminal justice system previously, carrying a handgun into a sporting event. And the elder McMichael was working for the prosecutor's office at the time as an investigator. I'm sorry?
Was that in a high school or something?
In a high school. He carried into a high school sporting event. Excuse me. Thank you. High school sporting event. So there are a lot of facts behind this that make this look even worse than it already does. So I encourage people, get get the information. Don't just rely on what you hear. Don't just rely on that. Get the information. And then I think it's really good. I'm not familiar with the Be the Bridge program, but as Brian was detailing it, if it talks about getting the history, read some history, and then read some facts. Look at cold, hard facts. Look at poverty rates. Look at housing. Look at economics. Look at healthcare. Look at COVID-19. Do a comparison between Black people and white people. And you don't have to be a super scientist, but just look at some of the information. Inform yourselves. And then I think the next thing people have to do, which Al did not ask me, but
go ahead.
Scripture says, there's a scripture that I like in I think it's 2 Corinthians 13. It says, examine yourselves to see whether or not you're in the faith. Black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people, I don't care who you are, people, we have to examine ourselves. And if we're going to call ourselves Christian, we have to figure out, are we actually loving our neighbor? Because Jesus made it abundantly clear that our neighbor is everyone, particularly the people that don't come from our same ethnic group. So, that Good Samaritan story is not some fable. Right. The Good Samaritan story is about a person who was the hated, who gave love and comfort to the hater. See, that's the thing about that story. The Samaritan, they were the ones that the Jews did not like. And the guy who was on the road probably was a Jew. And so the Samaritan goes over and helps the Ku Klux Klan member on the side of the road. So the only way you can do that, you have to examine yourself. And you have to say, am I going to be a Christian today? Or am I going to be a Klan member? Am I going to be a Christian today? Or am I going to be I hate all white people? Am I going to be a Christian today? What am I going to do? What role am I going to play? And I think that if people will honestly look at love your neighbor, love God, love neighbor, love self, you have to understand that there was no justification for what those two men did on that road. None, zero. And then they lied. And you know why they lied? And why they did it? Because they knew they could get away with it until their friend, whose I think last name is Brian, their friend publicized the video. And thank you for publicizing that video. That was there. He knew those guys. He knew the McMichaels, the guy who took the video, and he publicized it. And thank God for somebody who says, you know what? Let's just let the facts tell the tale.
Well, he said that it was going to exonerate the McMichaels, so he thought that it was there. So I really appreciate that. That very good stuff. We gotta wrap it up. I want all of you to jump in, because we as a Life Church network, I think that we need to become a model of justice together. And so what can we do? And now we're talking strategies and some of the things that Don Earl was talking about. What could we do so that we can be a model of justice, so that, now this is the deal, so that the world will know that we're followers of Jesus. And we have an opportunity with the numbers that we have as a network to show the state that Jesus rose from the dead. So the question is, what can we do as a network in order to respond properly to injustice, in order to make sure that our people are walking alongside us, embracing racial righteousness? Jump on in.
This, I think, for one, a choir is always louder than a soloist. And this is a beautiful beginning to a choir, what you see on your screen right now. And I'm going to stop talking in a moment, because I think that it highlights my next point, that as a white man, I want to leverage every bit of my privilege and position that I can, but I also want to sit at the feet of my brothers and sisters of color and allow them to teach me. And I want to model that. And to lead me. And so I think this is part of it, being a part of the choir, but not as a white person always feeling like you have to be the choir director.
Wow, that's good. Don Earl.
I would say one, as I mentioned before, is make this a priority. This is not an addendum to the gospel. This is a part of the gospel. You can read that in Ephesians 2. That would be number one. And also create space for friends, as Georgia was mentioning, as far as gathering the facts, and I agree with that. Definitely make sure you gather facts and all that, but even lean into, while you're gathering facts, hook up with a friend, create space where friendships can be created, because those facts, as the young people will say, hit different when it's someone you care about. Not just the issue, but when it's someone you care about. And then again, create that grace and space. One thing, and I'll share this and be done, in our small groups, what we've created, most of all our groups are multicultural and also multi-generational groups that we have. And Brendan Dry, our associate pastor, brought this, but we do a cultural autobiography, where there's a list of questions about your background. Again, when it relates to context, understanding people, context, why people do what they do, we were able to sit and share, and we're still in the process of sharing cultural autobiographies, where people are hearing their stories, and sharing their stories of how they were raised and what things mean to them and how it's different. And so again, we create space for relationships to be built. And again, biggest thing is make it a priority. Let's not be reactive, but proactive.
Yeah. That's really good stuff. Thank you. Nathan.
Yeah. I'll talk about my part.
And let me ask you this. Can we kind of focus it to how we can do this together?
Yeah, I can
do
go
ahead,
that.
Nathan.
Yeah, I think conversation's huge, and I think action will be important. Proximity, and whether that's specific kinds of outreach or what we can do together as a team will allow the majority of my congregation, not just the leaders, but of course the leaders, but our congregation, to walk next to some people and get their hands dirty together on a common goal. And I think when those relationships continue to grow, like you said, when you have a relationship and you get to know people and you see them, man, you have to enter in, or like we've said so much, it's not possible to be friends. So I think one of the strategies I'd love to see is how we can partner together with our unique gifts to make an impact in whatever way that looks like in our cities, in Detroit, whatever that looks like. And again, adopting Brian's attitude towards it of sitting at the feet and learning and listening. And I always want to be at the table and give my influence, but I don't be leading the table. Yeah. I want to learn, and I want to give what I can.
Yeah. Well, good. Brian, did you talk already, or no? I think it was Dan. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I talked already about the choir
right.
and just.
That's right. Yeah.
Brian and I look alike.
Yeah. And we both have last names that are hard to pronounce. So.
Yeah.
It's the beard. Is that
what it is?
Daniel. Go ahead.
It's the forehead. It's the forehead is what it is.
Oh,
forehead.
It's actually
a lot of forehead.
A 5-head, brother.
You have, Brian, you have part of a forehead that I kind of wish I had, because you still have some of that here. So I want, So anyway, Daniel.
So Don Arrow mentioned earlier about leaders using their voice, but if I can tweak that, brother, I would say use your informed voice. Because I have learned that some department leaders in churches actually don't know anything about racial issues and may not even feel that way. So I think lead pastors equipping your department, and I think even making it mandatory that they go through something like Be the Bridge and Color of Compromise, make it a mandatory issue. Yeah. I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about race. I'm passionate about all those things, but those things are part of the holistic ministry that we've been given. So I would say making it mandatory. Don't assume your leaders know the right thing to say, because they might actually be doing more damage to the congregation by reinforcing some of those stereotypes. So that there's that piece. I think, man, one of the things I love is expository preaching. I love going through books of the Bible. And one of the reasons I love going through books of the Bible is that eventually you will run across racial issues. You will run across unity issues. We're currently going through Ephesians, and as God would have it, in the next 2 weeks, guess what we're talking about? Christ who breaks down the divide and wall.
Yeah. And who's preached it?
Somebody's going to preach it. I'm not going to give no names. Somebody's going to preach it. So there's that piece. And so the equipping of people. And then I think with brothers and sisters who are Caucasian, this is unique. So take this with a grain of salt. I'm not actually go find a Negro somewhere and be like, hey, will you be my Negro? But be intentional to have a friend, not someone that is in a subordinate role to you, that might not be willing to speak. Nathan and I don't have that issue, brother, because we have real talk. So ours is unique. But perhaps someone who is in a lateral position, or maybe if it is someone subordinate that you know that they got enough strength in the Lord to be able to speak to you candidly, have that conversation to be candid, that they can call you out on the carpet on your mess. And even maybe God will and vice versa. So amen. So I think that would be it. And I think from a more practical perspective, I think all the pastors here and the churches that we lead need to figure out some kind of way for our people to start to get to know each other.
Yes.
In a way that I think is very intentional. And having us experience each other, because here's the thing, and I'll shut up when I say this, is I'm tired of churches wanting to be multicultural and multi-ethnic. I want them to be intercultural and interethnic. That's a whole different ballgame. Because in order for you to be multi-ethnic, you just have to have a couple of people that are from a different ethnicity in your church, essentially. And some people will go further and say, well, as long as the dominant race is not more than 80%. All that lets me know that you're still in your silos. It would be great for you to become a church with multiple ethnicities and then become a new culture on your own, where everyone's ethnicity is being expressed and enjoyed in the beauty of God and the gospel. So I think that's the goal. That's the hope to see, is that a church where, we just don't have a token Black person, a token Chinese person. We don't have, but we have leadership that resembles that, not just leadership by name and tokenism, but true leadership that resembles that, and giving them the platform to be able to not just be at the table. Because, and I told you this before, Alan, one of my brothers said, sometimes when Black people are invited to the table, we have to ask the question, am I on the menu or am I asked to take a seat? And sometimes, and more than often, we're on the menu. We're consumed and spit out when we're done and when our use is done. But to be able to invite Black folks to the table and have them have a seat, and even be willing to withdraw yourself from the seat, is going to be very impactful in moving this ahead.
The intercultural you're talking about is also interdependent. And so that we're dependent upon each other. There has to be a real interdependence. Finally, Georgia Hill, how are you going to encourage your people to be a part of this whole movement of responding properly to injustice?
Well, I think for people in the African-American community, it's a little slightly different emphasis. So when we started talking at Bible study on Thursday, when we started talking about this case, we talked about the fact that we know that God comes to bring justice. But often what we're really asking for is not justice. We're really asking for revenge and retribution. And so I think what Black people have to do is we've got to search our own hearts, and not just seek, blood for blood, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. We have to go beyond that. And so we actually prayed, believe it or not, a prayer of forgiveness. We talked about that for those two men. And just that God would bring justice, that we're not looking for revenge. We're not looking for retribution. We're not looking for something that's going to destroy some other families, but we're looking for some justice. And so I think that Black people have to be very also self-reflective. Absolutely. And we have to examine our own views. What do we really think about white people? Like, do we have these, gross generalizations about them? And do we have we extended ourselves to have we always, most time in workplaces, school, whatever, we know a lot of white people just because of the numbers, but we have to also have friends, real friends, where you care about one another's lives, and you
invite them over to barbecue.
You got to be able to hang out. You got to be, that's the thing. We got to be concerned about each other's families and children and where we live, and to be neighbors.
Well, when Dylan Roof shot up those church members in Charleston, I did a sermon that very next day. And I remember I talked about what you said, Georgia, and I was getting to the whole idea of forgiveness. And I had a slide of his picture that popped up, right when I had said forgiveness. Pow. And there was a gasp of looking at Dylan Roof, the guy who killed countless Black folk. And though and I saw got a lot of comments. I know that that's true, but I don't know if I could. And then we are encouraging people to take communion while we still have these bad feelings.
Yeah. Hey,
So,
Alan,
yes.
to that point, and I'm done. I shared this on Thursday. Be angry. Scripture says that. But it also says to sin not. And so my sister commented on there and she said, but she's angry, upset. I'm like, take those raw emotions. For those that are angry, take those raw emotions and give them to God. Bring them to God and ask God, hey, what can you do with this? I mean, be real with him and allow him to create and make something beautiful, because that anger can be a catalyst of change. You can use it for destruction or construction. And so when you bring it to God, I believe, again, he can give you insight to use that anger to do something beautiful.
Well, you're exactly right. And as Daniel talked about expositional preaching, theology, good theology is very important right now. That is, all of us, every one of us, we are sinful. Not just one group of people, but we all are in need of Jesus Christ and the blood of Jesus Christ. So when we're talking about all types of people, when I'm talking about people at Life Church, look, you're sinful, they're sinful, we all are a mess. And so we all need to be crying out and lament together. So that may be the next step, maybe us coming together in a service and lament together.
Amen.
We'll be talking about that. That would be wonderful.
That would be really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the gifts of this stay-at-home order is that we've had to learn how to do life digitally.
Yeah.
And it enables us to do small groups even and Bible studies. If we did it this way, it broadens our ability to incorporate additional peoples into it. And so it might be worth looking at that. How can we use digital means to bring people together who live an hour and 10 minutes apart,
Absolutely,
but could be together digitally like this? I think that'd be worth talking about.
Let's schedule a meeting, guys. Let's get to guys and gals, all of us, and let's talk about how we can do something like that. We're all talking together. And beyond that, wouldn't a good picnic be good?
Yeah.
Isn't that a good idea?
Yeah.
Get us all together, eating some food, and I'll bring my potato salad with some seasonings in it, and so you can...
We could all bring our stereotypical food, some water.
Who gets to bring the mac and cheese? That's the question.
We can whatever we want.
I'll bring deer jerky. How about that?
Hey guys, thank you very much for joining us on Lunchbreak with Alan Tumpkin. I tell you, I am so grateful for your input and for our first step.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you for your leadership, Alan.
Thank you, Alan, for the invitation.
Alan.
Yeah, I love you guys.
We're encouraging our people who are watching to write down their ideas of how we can, as a church, respond properly to injustice. We are going to look at those and consider them for sure.
And share this with your friends.
Yes, everyone, share this. That's right.
Yeah.
God bless all of you. And those who are watching, you're again looking at Lunch Break. Tomorrow I'll be back, continuing a series on checkups in the book of Revelation. And we're looking at chapter 2. We're looking at the third church, beginning chapter 3, actually, I believe it is. So the church of Asia Minor, one of the 7. So that's at 12:15, Lunch Break with me, and I'll see you then. So again, thanks guys for coming. And we hope to get together and talk again real soon. Lord bless you.
Love you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye. Much love, y'all.